You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Hollowed House of Horrors, the podcast that begs to ask the question, how much blood does a person really have in their body? And how quickly could you hack someone in half with a chainsaw? This is the Horror Ramblings Podcast with, of course, this guy here, Lester, and the always amazing Steven. How are you today, Steven?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there best I can. It's been one of those weeks, but the weekend always brings a lot of fun, and this show always brings a lot of fun. Something about decapitation and psychopaths just puts me in a good mood.
Mm-hmm. Very, very calming, soothing themes.
Sleep by chainsaw, you know? It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to tell you real quick, and I hope this isn't I don't think it'll spoil the movie for you, but it is a little nod. I did find out we were talking about Sam Raimi's car being in the new Evil Dead movie.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it's not. This is the first movie that it's not been in.
Okay.
But I guess to pay a little bit of tribute to it, there is a chainsaw. You can't have Evil Dead without a chainsaw.
Sure.
I guess the color of the chainsaw is the same color as the car.
Ah, okay.
So
clever.
Kind of a cool little nod. And Bruce Campbell does have a cameo in it, but it's not how you would think. I had that spoiled for me too. I don't know if you had seen that anywhere online or anything.
I heard about the cameo, and I did hear that it was a secret, probably not going to expect where you think it's going to show up. So
yeah,
I'm aware of it, but I don't know what it is, and hopefully I can keep it that way, because I'd like to discover it on my own.
Yeah, and you know, I will say this. I know I sent you a video clip a little while back. The director was talking to the interviewer, and they were talking about the books, and that there are multiple books in the Evil Dead universe. And that made me feel good, because we had talked about that previously on the show, about how there could be other books, they could tell other stories all over the place. And that just shows that you and I are apparently on the right direction when it comes to that stuff. Right. And I've been trying not to have it spoiled for me. I've been seeing some clips of the Evil Dead movie, the new one. There was a clip that they released not too long ago. The actual studio released it for people to see. And from what I could tell, it looks phenomenal. And I haven't gotten the chance to go see it yet, and I really want to go see it. But it'll happen when it happens, I guess.
Yeah, no. Understandable. It's things are busy right now, and can't help it. Got to find the time.
Yeah,
this is why I'm kind of a supporter of theaters at home. I understand that takes away from actual theaters, so I get it. But for some of us who cannot always get out, it's a convenient option for us to have.
Yes, very much so. You know, I see these people who that's all they do is they go and they watch movies, they review them. That's how they make their living. And I'm like, where was that during career day at school?
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm going to even argue a little bit more against theaters. And again, I'm not trying to take them down. I'm not trying to take them down whatsoever. But hear me out. So we have a local theater nearby, and we went to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 that came out. And this is one of those that we can... Kid is not a problem, you know. It's just like, well, we can take her. She'll be fine. Whether she pays attention to it or not, she'll at least be there. You know, there's not going to be anything that's going to traumatize her, at least. I didn't think so. And when we go to this theater, it seems like every visit, every time that we seem to go, it gets worse and worse. Like this time, they didn't even start the projector. Like, it's past the time the movie should be starting, and it's just not on. Some guy goes out there to ask what the deal was. They didn't even realize that they didn't turn it on. So That's problem number one. Number two, the audio settings, you feel like they should be calibrated properly to where you have this wonderful surround sound, correct?
Yeah.
No. Everything just seems off. So like music would be playing and you'd expect the music to be banging. It felt like out in the distance is how you're hearing it, but yet every other thing, voices and just regular sound effects were louder than the music playing, and that just didn't add up.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm watching this at a theater where everything should be top notch, and yet my sound system at home would probably be doing 10 times better than what they're doing right now.
Wow.
So if the chains are not going to give a damn, then why should we be giving them money to stay afloat?
Real quick on what you were just saying, actually, it's hilarious. We took my son to go see the new Super Mario Brothers movie the other day. And, you know, I've seen clips of it, and all the clips that I had seen, the movie looked beautiful. Just amazing animation. Everything was really bright and colorful. We get to the theater, and I don't know if maybe they just have an older projector, or I don't know if like the bulb on the projector was going bad. We're sitting there, and the sound was okay. Like, I had no issues with the sound, but it honestly looked almost like they were playing a version of the movie that someone recorded on their phone or something, because it wasn't bright and colorful and everything else. It was like really dulled down. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and like it wasn't unwatchable, but I'm like, I'm paying to go see this. I would expect it to be at least the way that I see it on my phone. Like, I'm watching clips on my phone of it, and it's beautiful and bright and amazing. And you go here, and it's like, it's lost all of its shine. It's lost all of its luster. And I'm like, why am I paying to see this here? And it's like the studios, not the studios here. Here I go talking bad about studios again. The theaters, a lot of them anymore, it's like they just think, oh, well, we've got a big screen. And that's all you guys are here for, is the big screen. No, I expect my movie to look nice, and I expect it to be, you know, great sound quality. I expect, you know, to have, I mean, our chairs were falling apart at the theater, and that's a completely other subject on its own. But, you know, you're spending this money to go see these movies. You better have a great sound system, and you better have a projector that is going to put that film up there as crisp and clean as possible, because that's what the people are going for. They're going for that experience of seeing it, yes, on a big screen, but we expect it to look nice. I mean, at this point in time, I could just go buy a big inflatable projector screen and spend maybe $1,000, maybe $1,500 on a projector, and it would look nicer than the movie theater that we have here in town.
Yeah, that's my argument, is that if theater chains want us to continue to go to the theater, then make the experience worth going for. It's not about getting to see the movie immediately. Sure, I would love to see every movie the moment it comes out, but if my experience in the theater is going to be garbage, why do I want to go back?
Exactly.
You know? So yeah, it's not just the studios that need to be worried about theaters dropping. The theaters chains themselves don't need to be blaming the studios. They need to be blaming themselves for not putting it up.
Yeah.
And making it the experience we all expect.
Well, and I think a lot of places get kind of turned away by it, because sending it to a person's house directly, they're worried they're not going to make as much money, because it's like, okay, well, we're going to charge you $20 to stream this at your house, but you might have a house full of people. So their whole train of thought is, oh, well, I'm going to just take and make it to where it's, I don't know, where it's, you know, what's the word I'm thinking of here? Rewind a second, because I'm losing my marbles. They are worried about losing money, and they're worried that the more people that you invite over to your house to watch a movie, the less people are going to go to the theater. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say in the first place, but hey, we're here. You know, if they're worried about that, maybe make some kind of deal with people, and make it to where, I don't know, you do something along the lines of, you pay extra up front to basically rent the movie when it comes out, and you get like a code or something where you can get a digital copy of the movie.
Yeah.
I think that would be awesome if they did that. Everybody's getting digital copies of things now. Right. And, you know, I guess you're getting your money's worth there, because, yeah, you might have rented it and your friends might have watched it with you, but now you own it because you got the better deal. Now when your friends come around to buy it, maybe they're paying a different price, you know, maybe make it to where you save like $10 if you just buy it the same time that you rent it. And then your friends, when they decide that they want to buy it later, they have to pay the full price for the film itself. You know, it's little things like that. I know studios and theaters, they're worried about losing money, but be good to your people. I mean, audiences are there for a show. Make it worthwhile. So,
I mean, do those big presentations at the beginning where it's all enjoy the show, make sure your phones are off, all the experience is going to be ruined if you talk or do anything. So they make this big deal on the screen, yet they don't deliver. I mean, yeah, I understand other people can ruin it, but you're ruining it too because you're not presenting the movie in the best possible form.
You know, we went to a theater, this was a while back. It was one of those really nice theaters where you can actually order food and like they bring your food to you and the seats reclined and, you know, all of that. Really well kept up theater. They took great care of it. Their sound system was awesome. We paid probably almost twice, maybe a little over twice as much as what a normal ticket would cost here in town. But the truth is, I would go to that theater and spend the extra money because we had such a good experience. You know, it's even like drive-ins. Like there's some drive-ins around here, and with a drive-in, I guess you sort of don't know what to expect sometimes. But I'd rather go to the drive-in and not know what to expect than go to a theater where I'm gonna go pay money to sit inside of a room for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and just hate what I'm watching. You know, I might enjoy the movie, but why am I going to watch the movie in such terrible quality? You know?
Right.
And Guardians of the Galaxy was, you know, I heard this is sort of the closing for these characters. I guess James Gunn wanted to just do a trilogy with these characters, and I will have to ask you off of the mic what you thought of it and everything, because I know that's probably a whole other conversation, but
yeah.
I've seen clips of it, and I can already picture here in town how terrible the quality would be, and it makes me not want to go. So
no, and I understand that. It's frustrating to no end to pay good money for something, and then like you said, I'd at least go into the drive-in. I expect a little less quality. Not to say that it's a bad experience, but my expectations are lowered a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I know you're outside, you're on a screen, so you know things can happen. You're having to listen off of your radio. I get it. The experience is going to be different. So I would rather pay that money for hell around here. I don't know if it's the same where you're at, but we get a double feature for the essentially the same price going to the theater. So why not just do that?
Yeah, we actually one of our drive-ins here. It's funny because they would play. There was one drive-in here that used to do double features, but they used to have 2 screens. And so the adults would be watching like more adult-oriented movies, and the kids would be watching the kid movies on the other screen. Obviously, that was not the best plan because people would turn and watch other movies. But I remember going and doing double features. I remember doing carloads of people getting up on top of the car to watch the movie. When you go to the drive-in, it's not just going for the movie. You're going there for that experience of going to the drive-in. So
same with going to the theater.
Exactly.
There's an experience you expect.
Exactly.
And yeah, so far I would say that the drive-in experience has never let me down. Let's just put it that way.
You know, and it's funny, you know, talking of the drive-in, I can think of 2 drive-ins that have never let people down. One of them's on Shudder.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I get where you're coming from with that, definitely, because it's just, I think that, especially the way that the world is now, people are so worried, too, about going out. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said, you know, we don't do a whole lot. We're kind of homebodies because we worry we're going to go out and get shot up somewhere. And I'm like, man, like, there's a lot of truth behind that. And if studios want to send movies over to streaming services, well, do it. It doesn't have to be free. You can charge for it, and you're still going to make money off of it. Like that's the thing. It all boils down to the money aspect of it. And, you know, the theaters are making millions of dollars by charging asinine prices for popcorn and cheap little snacks. And I mean, our theater's so expensive with food and everything half the time. There used to be a meme about our town because our movie theater is right next to a Dollar General. They're in the same plaza. And people used to go over to Dollar General and buy snacks and stuff and sneak them into the theater. So there was a meme. It was a picture of that, and it was like, you know, you're from this town if you know what these two have to do with each other, or something like that. But it all boils down to corporate greed at the end of the day, because they could put some money back into the theaters. They could revamp them. They could make them better. And instead of waiting until things are so bad that you're spending a ton of money, why not just a little bit at a time fix it up? But they don't think like that. They want to hold on as long as they can to the money that they have, and the fear of losing it definitely affects the audiences. So, but I could go on a tangent about this all day. But before we get into the meat of the episode, no pun intended there, was there any random little news bits you had that you might have wanted to share? I know sometimes you've got some interesting news bits.
I don't know if there was anything that really caught my eye this week, and if it did, I may have shared it on our Facebook page, because I've been trying to keep up with little things, and if there was ever something that just kind of caught my eye, I would want to kind of bring it up or have a discussion about it. And I feel like we had a discussion about something that I posted, but I cannot for the life of me remember what it was. I don't know if it was...
Trying to remember.
I'm going to say no. I don't think there's anything that I have that I can think of in this particular moment.
I do have like a few quick things that just hit my mind. Isn't there going to be a new release of, is it Bride of Chucky?
Oh, yes. The Shout Factory, they are releasing the next 4 Child's Play entries, or I guess these would be the Chucky movies, if you will. So Bride, Seed, Curse, and Cult are all going to be on 4K. And they normally do, obviously they'll do like posters and whatnot that they offer up. And then they have extras. I think they were doing like enamel pins and I think some cards or something like that, like trading cards of some sort. I went with the cheaper, because I don't need enamel pins. I don't collect those. The posters I'm excited for. I think I've still got a few extra frames that I haven't used yet. So I'm going to have to rearrange my posters in the room. But yeah, I'm excited for those and can't wait. I was hoping they would release those. Like I didn't have, not to say that I didn't have hope that they would, but it was just like, well, if they get around to it, sure. But I wasn't holding my breath. I didn't realize the turnaround would be so quick, because the 4K versions of those others came out, I think September, October of last year. So these are coming out in July, if I'm not mistaken.
That's nuts.
So yeah, keep your eyes open, man, because I'm excited. And I try to keep sharing things like that on our Facebook page. Anytime I see like a new release coming, I know that The Burning, I think that was another one. Yeah. The Cropsey story, that's coming out on 4K. I think that was Shout as well, but that could have been Arrow, and I'm not 100% sure on that. But Arrow's doing a lot of awesome stuff over there too. I'm trying to keep track of a lot of their stuff. They're not primarily horror. Not that Shout Factory is either, but I noticed they seem to push them a lot more. But no, I'm trying to keep track of a lot of these, and just, yeah, anytime something big like that comes around, I'm willing to share it with everyone and let everybody know, because these are, for me, things you don't want to miss.
Yeah. I also, while it's on my mind, 2 things real quick. Anyone that listens to the show that goes to Horror Hound, they are going to be having some interesting people there this year. There is a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street cast that's going to be there. Robert Englund's going to be there. The little girl that plays Megan is going to be there. I think she would be fun to meet. That's cool. And I think this is one of her first conventions, so that should be pretty cool. But back to the Robert Englund thing real quick, I wanted to mention Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story. It is getting a theatrical release. They are also going to be doing a one of those like steelbook box sets. I haven't looked at all of the goodies that are coming with it, but it looks like it's going to be quite a treat. And I love the angle that they're taking with the documentary. Even in the beginning when they're talking, they mention, there are horror icons, the characters that are icons, but then there are actors who are iconic. And Robert Englund will be the first one to tell you that he never set out to be a horror icon. It just kind of happened.
Right.
And he is a classically trained actor. He can get up and he can quote Shakespeare. Like, a lot of people don't know that about him. I'm ready to watch it. I think it's going to be a real treat, but I would keep an eye out for that. I don't have all the information for it like right in front of me right at the moment, but from the trailer, it looks like it's going to be a real treat. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. I love listening to him talk. He tells a lot of really good stories. He's got a good voice. So just sitting there at the conventions, he's always such a treat to just hear talk. Like, you could just sit and hear him talk. He doesn't even have to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street or about Freddy. Like, he could literally read how to put a piece of furniture from IKEA together, and I would listen to it. Like, he should do more narration work. I really think he should. Like, he's really good at it.
Yeah.
What else was I gonna? Oh, I don't know. I know I sent you some YouTube videos a little while back to watch, and I can't remember the one. I'll have to look it up again. There was one I watched about a killer dummy, and I sent it to you. It's gonna drive me crazy because I cannot think of the name of it. Yeah, it'll come to me at the most random time. But I saw it somewhere, and it's about this little dummy who goes and he's trying to kill people, but he's really bad at it. Like, he's awful at it. And I would love to see somebody pick it up and make it into a full-length movie. Some people get lucky with that YouTube stuff and they make it. And I know this is completely random that I bring it up, but for some reason I was just thinking about it. But it is the dumbest thing that I've ever seen, but it's so entertaining. Anyone who ever wants to be entertained, just look up some YouTube videos of horror movies and everything, because there are some funny amateur films out there. Finley is what it's called. Finley,
yes, I have heard of that. Yeah.
The killer dummy that is not very good at what he does. Has a great twist ending and everything else too. But I'm all over the place, so we might as well go ahead and get into the meat of our show. As I say again, no pun intended. It is about a family that enjoys meat, a certain kind of meat.
That's a good old meat there. You gotta know your prime meat. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Anybody that doesn't know, we are going to be talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre today, which is one of your favorite film franchises.
It is. It's one that I love dearly and frustrates me on so many levels because for my money, there are more bad entries in this franchise than good. And even as I look at it, and I'm trying to make sure that my statement is true, I might have to retract that, but it's damn close. It's almost 50-50 down the line, because I feel like filmmakers who have tried their hand at this do not understand the concept as what made the first and even the second. And I know the second one can be divisive, but some filmmakers do not understand what makes it work on some level. And maybe I don't even understand what makes it work. But there's just something about what Tobe Hooper did that is unique. Yeah. He essentially kicked off in some aspect. This is the granddaddy of slasher films, if you think about it.
Yeah.
I know Halloween could really kind of take the cake on that with the Mass Killer, but I honestly feel like Texas Chainsaw is the one that really kicks it all off. And I don't know, I guess we'll kind of break down what makes everything kind of work and not work in each one, because first and foremost, like I said, 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Tobe Hooper, he had an idea, and I've listened to I've watched documentaries, I've listened to commentary of the film, and he even mentioned that he was trying to make a comedy. Yeah. Believe it or not, like a dark comedy. And it's hard to see, but I get it. I can get where some of the darker humor kind of comes into play.
Right.
But it's very, very hard to argue that it's a comedy. So maybe I'm not getting the joke in the same way. But if he said, obviously, with part 2, yeah, I'm making a comedy, then sure. But maybe he leaned more into the horror aspect than the comedy aspect initially, and then tried to do something more comedic for part 2. But yeah, I guess I can see some of the darker humored elements. Like, Franklin is, without a doubt, the most annoying yet comedic character in the film, if you think about it, because all he does is whine and bitch, and just he gets on your nerves to the point that when he dies, spoilers for all this, for especially a 50-year-old movie, but you feel sorry, but at the same time, you're just like, I don't have to hear him whine anymore.
True.
You know?
True.
And I don't want to make that sound terrible, but it's true. Because throughout the entire, Sally, oh, Sally, what are we going to do, Sally? I just don't know, Sally. And after a while, you start to feel for Sally because it's like, Jesus Christ, shut up, dude. I get it. I'm with you.
There are characters in horror films, though, that just something about them dying, like, you're relieved about it. And you feel kind of bad that you're relieved, but you're like, yeah, you needed to die.
Yeah. And I've even heard, at least according to the film commentary, they said that Paul Partain, the guy that played Franklin, committed to the role to the point where when they yelled cut, he would remain in character.
Yeah, Lord.
So it wasn't just on screen, but off screen. So it just, when they were finally done with him, they were so relieved.
Yeah.
Because it was like, Jesus Christ, man, you're doing great, but go away.
Right.
Like, you've pushed it to a point where we cannot tolerate this shit
Now,
anymore. So just...
He was in the wheelchair, right?
Yes.
Okay, I was making sure that I remembered that, right? Because I remember when they're in the woods and Leatherface coming out in the woods. Still a shocking scene, but as funny as it sounds, I watched that scene today, and when Leatherface just, pops out and gets him, I'm like, it's shock, but I actually have a laugh about it because it's just sort of unexpected.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like the same feeling that I get from Friday the 13th when Jason, I think he kicks that kid down the steps that's in the wheelchair, if I remember right.
Puts a hatchet into his face.
And he goes, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
But him going down the steps to this day, like, that still makes me laugh. Like, I might sound kind of bad, but I feel like killers should even have standards. So when they, like, kill somebody that's in a wheelchair or something, as bad as it sounds, I'm like, wow, you really don't discriminate.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes me laugh.
But you know what? I mean, I think it's all right. It's okay to laugh at something that I understand people might say, oh, you're going to hell for that one. But sometimes you can laugh at things and it's fine. Don't feel bad. If it's a, how do I go? There's a line somewhere. Okay. You can't laugh at everything.
Yeah.
Some things are bridged too far, but certain things, I think you can just, like those things. It's ridiculous. It didn't happen in real life. Now, if it did, maybe then we'd be like, okay, but it's a ridiculous scene.
Yeah.
And it happened. And yeah, I could see why it could get a chuckle out of somebody.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Well, I was going to say another character in the film that I feel like is one of those comedic and kind of teeters that line would be the hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Because just the attitude and just the manic energy that comes off of him, he makes you uncomfortable, but at the same time, I can see where you can get a laugh out of him because of just the nervous laughter and just the weird attitude that he kind of conveys.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's always one of the things that just, it tickles me out of the movie is that guy.
I can see that.
And I definitely like his character.
I honestly think, too, the whole family is just a set of comedy characters, too. Even Leatherface. And I mean that just because the high-pitched noises he makes, and there's something about it that's, like, he's intimidating, but when he's swinging the chainsaw around and he's making his, like, high-pitched squealing noises and the screams and everything, like, you don't know whether to be afraid or to laugh about it. And let's be honest, when people are afraid in a situation, but it's also kind of funny, to help us not be so afraid, we do laugh. And I have to tell this story because it pertains to this exactly. I went to a haunted trail, and they had this building there, and you go into the building, and it's a whole house. It used to be a hotel. They call it like the haunted hotel or something. But you go all the way upstairs, then you go all the way down into the basement. Well, in the basement, they had a Texas Chainsaw Massacre scene, and Leatherface is down there. And I'm talking, and I'm getting a little out of the first movie here. I'm talking when Leatherface was wearing a dress and everything. This guy was in full dress, had the Leatherface mask on, spinning this chainsaw around. He was doing a phenomenal job. Like, he was really pushing, like, the boundary there. He was a great Leatherface. Well, we were the last group of the night. So we finally got to the point where, the jump scares were done, and we were just kind of having a good time at that point. Well, he puts his chainsaw down, like he's holding it still, but he has it down, down, just holding it down at his like legs, and he's like clearing his throat for a second, and then we go from high-pitched scream to a really low voice going, "So what'd you guys think of the place?" And I'm like, it's fantastic. And so now when I watch those movies, that's what I think of when I think of Leatherface. Like, I think that's how Leatherface really is. Like, he's with the family after he's gone nuts and, and everything, and then just sitting down at the table like, "Is dinner good, guys? Did I cook an okay dinner?" Like,
good.
I have that train of thought with it. And this was the same night that I motorboated Leatherface, so we won't get into all that. But
all right.
They even had a grandpa there. And in the original films, you don't know if he's dead or alive half the time. And the way that he flops around and everything, I felt very Weekend at Bernie's vibes from him.
I can see that.
And when you talk about it being a dark comedy, and I know we've had this conversation before, but when you mention that, like, that's what makes me think of these things. And, now that I've seen these other films over the years, I sort of associate certain things with it. The film is still great because that's the thing that I think works for this film. These characters are having fun doing what they're doing to these people.
Yeah.
They're finding it funny. They're enjoying it. And anyone who can take joy and make it funny to dismember and viciously murder and eat other people, that's terrifying.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I do want to kind of put a little wrinkle in that, because one of the more fascinating aspects for the original movie, especially when I watched it the first time, was the cook.
Yeah. Because
he seemed conflicted. Like, he was a character I could not wrap my head around, because when you first meet him, obviously he was like the gas station attendant. So you kind of got this old Texas charm out of the guy, and you're just like, all right, well, we'll probably never see him again. And then when she finally comes back around to him after being chased by Leatherface, and he was trying to calm her down, I didn't know what was going on. Now, granted, like, I had no idea what this movie was about. I was sold under the false pretense that it was based on a true story, which it is, technically, but we'll get into that in a second, but not in the way it's portrayed.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, so this is how all this went down. She got to the gas station. He's sitting there, whoa, calm down. I'll go get the truck. And I thought, great, he's going to help her. And maybe at this point, Leatherface is going to show up. He's going to gut the cook. And, she's going to have to run again. That was my thought process in the moment.
Yeah.
And then he comes in with rope and a bag and a broom. And I'm just sitting there going, whoa, wait a second. What is going on? So I was having the same reaction she was.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what the fuck is going on? Is he about to... Because I honestly thought he was about to rape her. I mean, to be quite frank, because it was just that nervous energy he had and that look on his face. I had no idea what was going on. I thought, this whole fucking town is nuts.
Right.
So he, puts her in the truck and just that whole scene. So I was starting to freak out even more at that point, because I had no clue what was going on. Then you run into the hitchhiker, and then you realize they're all in it together, and I'm like, oh shit. So it's a whole group. It's a whole family.
Yeah.
That just blew my mind. They get back, and then you see that dynamic between all the members, because the cook clearly shows that he is the top dog of the house. Now, the one thing I didn't understand at the time is how the relationships worked within the family, because I thought, is he their dad? And they're just like, how is that working? I found out, like, much later on, they're supposed to be brothers. So all three of them are brothers.
Okay.
So he's just the elder brother, and he's taking care of his other two, and they all are supposed to be working in some kind of unison to get food. Again, didn't understand it at the time. But then you get to the dinner scene, and as they're taunting her, he's enjoying it, and then he has a moment where he kind of recoils and is like, just get it over with. I'm tired of this. Like, he doesn't want to deal with the killing part. He'll cook it, he'll eat it, he'll deal with everything, but he just doesn't want the torment and the killing. That's where his line is drawn.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting aspect to the character, because it's like, okay, so are you, especially when she's pleading, you don't know, is he going to help her? Is he not? It's really bizarre. It's you don't know what way to take it, but he's loyal to his family at the end.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to help her escape. He's like, no, this is food.
Well, and I I think also when they do that with a character in a film, when they add like a moment where you doubt if the villain really wants to be the villain, I think that makes the audience even more uneasy because it shows just how unpredictable these characters are. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre was really good at doing that with him. And I remember the first time I watched it, I was right there with you at the gas station. I was like, what is he about to do to this girl?
Yeah.
Like, did she, like, my thought was, did she just get away from them only for something else to happen to her that's going to be really bad?
Right.
And then everything happened, and I'm like, holy moly. Now, I do have a really random question. I know you want to get into, what this movie's based off of, which if I know correctly, then we'll be going the same direction. But this is a very random question. If Texas Chainsaw Massacre hadn't been made in 1974, if it hadn't been made then, and this year that we're in right now, 2023, they announced that they were making Texas Chainsaw Massacre with today's technology and everything, do you think it would be as influential today as it was then?
Would it be made using the same script?
Same.
Let me ask you that.
Same script. All that's the same. It's just better technology and everything.
I don't think so, because there was something about it in the time. It really was capturing something in the moment, especially in the 1970s. The feel of how things were in that time period. I mean, granted, this is a decade that I didn't grow up in, so I wasn't really aware of the turmoil that was going on in the country at the time. So I feel like a lot of that, Tobe Hooper put a lot of his stamp on that, on some form of the social commentary that was going on at the time. It may not be as clear to some people today. I know that I've seen quite a few movies that have social commentary of the 60s and 70s that I personally don't relate to because I don't know what that was like. I didn't grow up in those times. So for some of that, I don't really think it would work. Furthermore, one of the greatest aspects of this movie that I just don't feel like would fly the same way today as it would or it did back then, especially in tricking your mind, is how not gory this film is.
Yeah.
And in today's standards, I mean, obviously we've had remakes, and what have they done? They've went full on with the chainsaw slaughter, where you get to see the chainsaws cutting into everybody. You see blood gushing everywhere. But back then, people were convinced they saw things they never saw.
Yep.
And it was all because of how Tobe Hooper framed it, portrayed it. And even as I watched it, I didn't even realize that it wasn't as bloody and gory as I imagined. I thought I saw these things, but I didn't.
Yeah.
None of us did. And that's the beauty of this movie for me on so many levels, is that it is not as gory as people immediately assume with the name Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
But people were to the point the movie got banned for violent material. I mean, and Tobe Hooper even pushed for a PG rating on this film, if you can believe it. And in some ways, you're like, well, yeah, I guess you could probably pull that off, because what gore do you see? You maybe see a few little blood spatters here and there.
Yeah.
Like the biggest parts that I could think of where you actually get to see blood would have been when Franklin's getting hacked up. You kind of see blood spray, but it's minimal.
Yeah.
Like someone just had it on their fingers and just like flicked it onto his, Leatherface's apron. And then the part where they cut Sally's finger for Grandpa to feed on.
Yeah.
Which, have you ever heard that story?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I hope this is a treat for everybody. So this is an absolutely true story that I've heard time and again, documentaries, commentaries, what have you. So they actually cut Marilyn Burns' finger in that scene. When all that happened in that scene, what had happened is that they're filming in Texas, they're filming in this big house, and it is like well over 100 degrees, sweltering heat. They're just suffering. And they did have like a prop where blood was supposed to come through a tube and just gush when they kind of ran the knife over her hand. Mm-hmm. But it was not working. It wasn't working at all. And they kept doing take after take, trying to get this to work. And Gunnar Hansen, the guy that played Leatherface, got so frustrated and just so fed up that he just said, fuck it. And he cut her finger. So the reaction on her face is like genuine, what the fuck did you just do? Because he cut her finger just to get the scene done and over with.
Can't say I blame him.
He was just like, and it's terrible. I hate that she got cut, but it was just, in the moment, in the heat and just the frustration, it was like, I screw it. If this is what it takes, then that's what we're doing.
You hear about stuff like that all the time, though, and it's great. Like, real quick, just off topic, and then I wanted to say something else about Texas Chainsaw Massacre as far as when it was made. But the movie Django Unchained, there's a scene in that where Leonardo DiCaprio's like going off on them, and he slams a glass and it breaks, and he's bleeding. And you see everybody in the room is like shocked. That's genuine because he actually really did break a glass. He accidentally cut himself. And Quentin Tarantino was just like, man, just roll with it. And I love when stuff like that happens. In Alien, when the chest burster burst out of his chest in the beginning. Yeah. They knew it was going to burst out of the chest. They didn't know there was going to be the blood and stuff like there was. So when all of them are shocked, they're really shocked. I love hearing stuff like that. But
oh yeah, for sure.
But real quick, back to something that I wanted to bring up. I think another reason why Texas Chainsaw Massacre wouldn't do as well today, if it came out today as opposed to when it did come out, it's something that I think a lot of 70s and 80s horror movies share. There is a grittiness to them, to the way that they are filmed. And I get that technology has become better, but in some ways I feel like that's a negative thing when it comes to the horror genre. I think having that gritty feel, they do found footage videos today, but they're just not the same. You can watch a movie that's playing out just like a normal movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not a found footage film. It's not presented like a found footage film.
Right.
But it almost seems like somebody was filming off to the side real events that were happening, because there's this grittiness to the look of it. It's not just the sets, it's not just the way the characters are dressed. That's not the only grittiness. It's what the actual film looks like. Yeah. And that is a hard thing for people to capture today in modern society. And films that do get a lot of praise that come out now, they do have some grittiness to them, but it's never the same. Right. And to bring him up, because I was just reading about him, Wes Craven, Last House on the Left. That movie got a lot of flack when it come out. People went nuts when that movie come out. And by today's standards, it's not that bad like it used to, like it was back then. Sure. But it's gritty, it's real, and it has an effect. So for me, that's why I feel like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it came out in the perfect era to come out. So
right. And I guess so we don't forget, because I did want to touch on the real story, is for those uninitiated, I have to keep this in my head sometimes that not everybody knows what I know. And I have to tell myself this all the time. So maybe our audience knows exactly what happened, but there may be one person out there who has no idea. So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre events as they happened did not happen. But if you've ever heard of the man Ed Gein, he was kind of the inspiration for a lot of what you kind of see, because Ed Gein was a serial killer. I guess that would be the proper term for him. Yeah. Who dug up bodies, who created furniture using the bodies. He wore the skin of his victims. Just a lot of the elements that they play with here are based on things he did. Yeah. So very loosely based. Now, if you even want to go a step further, another element to Ed Gein was he had a weird relationship with his mother. That was an element used in Psycho. Yeah. Essentially the book, which then obviously became the movie that we all know and love. But yeah, Ed Gein has been an influence in a lot of media because he was a very disturbed individual. Yes. And there have been biopics about him as well, several. Matter of fact, the one that I know of, and I don't know if you've seen any of them or not, but I think the one I saw came out I want to say in early 2000s, and it was by an actor. He actually wrote and starred and directed in it, if I'm not mistaken. He's one of those actors you probably know if you saw him, but you might not know his name. Steve Railsback. It was a very, very unique and I thought pretty good take on the material. You know, at least trying to present Ed Gein as, I don't want to say sympathetic, but just understanding the troubles in his head. You know, it wasn't really somebody that you could be like, oh, I feel sorry for this man. No, you're never going to really feel sorry for him.
You just had a better understanding.
Right. So whether or not they were true to him in general, that's debatable. But he was look stuff up about him, you know, history and whatnot, because he was a weird motherfucker.
I remember back when I was maybe 10, 11, my uncle would go to the movie store and we would rent a bunch of just cheap movies. And we rented a movie that was based off of Ed Gein. And there was a scene in it where he had put on all these different pieces of people. And he went out, he was like outside on his farmland. And he had like a cowbell and he was like hitting the bell and he was like howling at the moon and all this just like trippy stuff. But he had other people's skin on and he had another person's face on. And I remember seeing that.
Might have been the same movie.
Might have been.
Because that sounds very familiar.
Really disturbing. Like really disturbing. Well, do you know what the movie's called that he was in?
It was just Ed Gein from what I remember.
And what was the guy's name one more time?
Steve Railsback.
Steve Railsback. I'm going to look it up real quick.
I know I've seen him in... He's always like a side character. That's probably the first movie I've ever seen him where he was the lead.
You know what? Seeing pictures of him, the movie that you're talking about is the movie that I'm, seeing the cover of it. That is a great movie. It's really disturbing. And, you know...
Definitely did not do anything to glorify the man.
Yeah.
Just really presented some weird shit about him.
Well, and that's the thing, you know, don't glorify these people. They don't... If they're going to be known... They should be known for what they did, and the people that lost their lives should be the people that get the attention. I mean, you know, they raided his house. He had lamps made out of with lampshades made out of human skin, like a lampshade with a face. He made a belt out of human skin. You know, just really disturbing things.
Yeah. Oh, one more shout out before we walk away from this movie.
Yeah.
The narrator. Because most of these movies have narration at the beginning. It blew my mind when I found out who was narrating, because I had grown up watching a sitcom that has recently been rebooted called Night Court, and one of my favorite characters in that movie, or in that TV show, was Dan Fielding, played by John Larroquette, and come to find out, John Larroquette is the narrator at the beginning of this movie, who was paid in marijuana.
Which he did confirm that somebody asked him not too long ago at a convention or something, and he told the story about that. I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Yeah. So, hey, what a job. You know, just here, read this, and there you go. Here's just some weed.
Read this, smoke that, have a drink of this. Everything's going to be good. Man.
So let's move on to part 2, because I can't think of anything else I want to talk about with part 1. I mean, I'm sure we could go into greater detail. Grandpa, I'm sure I've mentioned on here before. I got to meet him at a convention once.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I brought that up. He was an awesome dude. So if you ever get a chance to meet John Dugan, who played Grandpa in this film, he's a delight. Hopefully he will not be, or people have a bad story about him, because I don't. I think he was an absolute gentleman. Awesome guy. But, so, and I may have told this story here as well, but Texas Chainsaw 2, I watched this and part 1 back to back. The very first time I ever watched it. This was about the time I had my first real job. I had my car. And so I would go down to the video store all the time and just grab up movies that I'd never seen. And Texas Chainsaw happened to be one of those that I realized I had never seen, you know, growing up. And I think, what was it? I saw a trailer for it called The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's not what it was called. It eventually became The Next Generation. So when I saw that, I thought, I've never seen these movies, but I always heard of them, so I'm going to go check them out. So I rented 1 and 2 back to back. When I tried watching part 1, this was in the middle of the night, mind you, okay? 11 o'clock, VHS, the grittiness, and no lights outside, anything. I got immediately creeped out and thought, no, I'm gonna save this for tomorrow. So watching this, or the first one, and then watching part 2, it's gonna be jarring because I did not expect what I got.
Yeah.
Because it was a completely different movie. It was similar but different. So it was a movie that took me a while to appreciate because I didn't understand what they were doing. But it stuck with me long enough that when I came back around to it a second time, I thought, okay, I'm seeing something that I can enjoy about this. It is a solid movie in my opinion. I can understand why it would be not everyone's cup of tea. But I feel like this is the movie that Tobe Hooper envisioned initially with the original film. You know, this hyper-realized kind of dark comedy that really goes to some dark places, but also makes you uneasy, and then you want to laugh, and then you don't want to laugh. But it's a little bit more comedic. I would say definitely more comedic than the first one, which is what threw me, because I didn't know whether to laugh or not at the time. But at the same time, they do some... This is the movie that the gore really comes into play. I mean, some of the shit you see in here is pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
When you think about it. Like, one scene in particular that always... If you think about it and you're just like, oh man, it's so rough, is one of the characters in the film goes by the name LG, played by Lou Perryman, who is one of those actors you probably know in something and not realize it, because I saw him in another movie here recently and I thought, holy shit, that's LG. Like, it just kind of caught me off guard. But he has his face cut off by Leatherface, and you see them peel the skin off, and then he gets... How he's still alive is beyond me, and when he kind of comes to. But he's sitting there with no face talking to Stretch, who is our lead in this film, played by Caroline Williams. And, oh man, it's just, you know? Like, you didn't see this in the original film. The original film, people thought we saw, what's her name? Pam, I think it's the character's name, get put on the meat hook.
Yeah.
That's one of those visceral scenes everyone thinks we saw, but you never saw her skin go through and pierce the meat hook.
And it's so...
But we all thought we saw it.
And it's so real. Like,
yeah.
Even in when they did the remakes, it just was not as effective.
No.
Something about the way he slammed her down on that, even to this day, that scene just makes me go, ugh.
And just the editing is so perfect that you feel it. You're just like,
right?
And you didn't have to see a thing. But you felt it. You saw it well enough in your head. So here, you're getting to see them do these vicious things, and it's disturbing on a different level, because now you're getting to see it in some ways, like just peeling off certain layers of skin, and you're just like, stop, I don't want to, because you can imagine what that would be like, and you just don't want it.
You know what I always enjoyed in the second one? I loved when Chop Top, the skin missing off the plate on his head, and he would scratch it.
Yeah.
And then he would pull off the skin, and he'd actually like try to eat his own skin and stuff. That always, for some reason, every time I see that, I like laugh, but I'm grossed out by it.
Yeah. It's just such a weird little quirk that he has. You just, and then even takes the lighter to the hanger and just keeps at it. I mean, I honestly wondered, I don't know if I've ever heard him confirm this or not, but I'm curious if that was something that was written in initially by Tobe Hooper, if that was something that Bill Moseley just kind of came up with on the fly and thought, what if he's just sitting there scratching at it? And
let's think here. So the second one came out in what, 86?
Mm-hmm.
So just follow me here, because this I might get a little more in left field with this one. We're talking the 80s. There were a lot of horror films coming out. There were also a lot of action movies coming out. To me, this movie almost feels like a horror comedy / action film, because I
can see that.
I feel like some of the fight scenes are really almost like action fight scenes in different action films, and seeing Leatherface go up against what's Dennis Hopper's character's name?
Lefty.
Yes, seeing the two of them go up against each other, and the chainsaws and everything else, it just, to me, it screamed like epic action scene. Like it was almost like I was seeing Arnold fight the Predator again to a degree.
Yeah.
Like that's the vibe I've always gotten from it. Like I've always looked at it like a weird horror comedy action film that just there's parts of it that are just so absurd, but it works. Like you expect the family to be absurd a little bit, and you expect things to be a little over the top, but for some reason it worked.
Now, I will say that one of my favorite aspects of this film is the return of Jim Sedow, the guy that played the cook.
Yeah.
And they obviously gave him a name in this one, Drayton, which I've heard this argument on the internet, and I don't know how I feel about it, is if you take a look at some of the names, obviously I've referred to him as the cook in the first film, and then here he was called Drayton. And then now we actually have a name, or a surname, Sawyer, which... can't tell me that's not spot on, Sawyer. And then Chop Top is supposed to be the twin brother of the hitchhiker, whose name we never got. However, the corpse that they're always carrying around, calling Nubbins, is supposed to be the hitchhiker. These are things that I've heard, but then I've also heard that these are not the same characters in each movie, which doesn't make sense, because you have a returning character. This is a sequel to the first film. So how can these be different characters?
Right.
That doesn't make. I don't know. I don't understand where that logic came into play. But no, Jim Sedow playing Drayton, just I don't know what it is about his charisma that he just kind of brings to it. We're number one. We're number. I just love good prime meat, and that's one of them hard shell peppercorns. Yeah, I just love. This town loves prime meat. I just love that attitude off of him. And he's probably got one of my all-time favorite lines in this film toward the end that it took me several viewings to ever catch. And I have no idea to this day what the fuck it means, but it cracks me up every time. Is they've got Stretch. They finally captured her. They're dragging her to Grandpa. And he's like, hey, Grandpa, look what we got for you. Slurpee booty. Don't know what Slurpee booty is, but it became one of my favorite things to say.
You know why I think he's so likable? He reminds me of, and this might just be like a stereotypical thing, but he's like the uncle at your family reunion who doesn't have his medication right.
Yeah.
Like that's what he puts me in the mind of for some reason. But I'm so glad you mentioned Slurpee booty. I'm gonna have to use that line.
Yeah. And funny enough, every time I bring it up, I seem to let someone in on it that they've never heard it, and they're just like, "What? I have never heard that." And I was like, "I didn't either." But one day it crossed my ears, and now I hear it every single time. So just some of the phrases and things that he says they're just because even when he's just rambling on about something, he'll just say some random shit, and it just cracks me up. I don't know, but. Bill Johnson as Leatherface, I feel like Leatherface is kind of the iteration here. How do I put this? I like what Gunnar Hansen did, and I don't feel like that they were playing two separate type of Leatherface, but this one does seem to have a little bit more personality to him.
Yeah.
Because he's smitten with Stretch, and so he seems like he seems more sympathetic. In a lot of ways, because you see like he's trying to protect her. And again, maybe this is one of the reasons some people don't like this movie, but I kind of like the added wrinkle to his personality. You know, we understand he's not quite all there in the head. So he's taken a liking to her, and he's just kind of smitten with her, and he wants to kind of have her around. And when they're talking about killing her, you see that conflict. He's like, oh, I don't want to do it. But then at the same time, he's like, but I gotta, because, you know, my brother's telling me I gotta do this. But I don't know. I just kind of like that conflict he's having with himself. It's very reminiscent of the conflict Drayton was having when it came to killing Sally.
Yeah.
You know, where he just didn't want to do it, or wanted them just to hurry up and get on with it. He's kind of in the same way. He's like, man, they're just going to take this away from me. Just so upset, but whatever. And even when he's trying to be romantic with her, it's just so disturbing, you know. But again, you're just like in it. It's like, yeah, whatever at this point.
Which, you know,
but
that's something that I think they've done with quite a few slashers. You have a few slashers that are like that. The two that come to my mind, you have Leatherface, who to me, he has like a child's mentality. He doesn't necessarily understand that the things that he's doing are bad things, I guess you could say.
Right.
And he becomes smitten. In later films, that does kind of happen again. In one of the remakes, he cuts off someone's face because he knows that the girl finds that person more attractive, and that women find that face more attractive, so he wants a new face that's more attractive. Like little things like that. It's almost comparable to Jason. If he sees someone that looks like his mother, then they can kind of manipulate that a little bit. And then you have characters that aren't really necessarily like that. I don't think Michael Myers is really like that. He will leave other characters alone to get to Laurie, but he's still trying to kill her. And then you have Freddy, who, let's just be honest, Freddy doesn't give a shit who he kills. So I wanted to kind of touch on that for just a second. I find that interesting. So
no, absolutely. And I think it doesn't work for all characters. Like I don't want to see myself feeling sympathy for Michael Myers.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing about that character that screams sympathetic. Same with Freddy. There's just, how do you sympathize with the child killer?
Right.
Difficult. You can enjoy the craziness of the character, but sympathizing, not something you can do.
Yeah.
Jason's sympathetic. Leatherface, some aspects sympathetic. So I wouldn't necessarily say I want it for all characters, but it is nice when you have the right character that you can kind of play that with. But last thing I want to touch on with this movie is I know we've kind of touched on everybody in it, but you really have to, for me personally, I feel like this is the film with the strongest cast. You have a lot of great character actors putting in their best. I know Dennis Hopper wasn't 100% thrilled with this film when it came out, but it's one of my favorite films with him in it.
Yeah.
And obviously, like I said, Caroline Williams and Bill Moseley both are probably best known for this movie alone, along with plenty others that they've had in their repertoire. But this is the one that everyone kind of goes back to, like, oh yeah, this is the one I remember you for. So, big credit to Tobe Hooper actually getting this film off the ground, because I know he had to deal with Canon, and if no one knows what the hell Canon Films is, there's a whole documentary on it. I recommend you go check that out, because I couldn't even justify the grand scope of that scam in just a few words. So he pretty much had to jump through hoops to get this made.
Yeah.
Or let me rephrase that. To get something else made that he really wanted to do, he got pushed into doing this, but he at least got to do what he wanted to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, well, you got to do this, you got to do that. He got to make the movie he wanted to, regardless of whether they liked it or not. So I applaud him for that. And yeah, it's definitely a different type of movie, and it's speaking of the decades, much like he did with the 70s. This was a call out to the 80s. There are a lot of missing scenes that I wish would have made it into the film, but I understand why they were cut. They're on deleted scenes if you want to go take a look at them. One in particular features Joe Bob Briggs, if you just want to see his lovely young mug back in the 80s. But yeah, highly recommend this one. The next one I feel like is another divisive one, but I'm going to argue in its favor, and that's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, aka Leatherface. This one was actually the very first released by a big studio, because this was the time that New Line got their hands on the franchise, and it kind of works as a sequel / reboot to the series, because it can stand on its own, but there are elements in it that kind of give you an idea that maybe possibly it's a sequel. For example, if you didn't know, Stretch has a cameo in the film. They don't say it's Stretch, but it's Caroline Williams. She's doing some investigating in some of the goings-on in the town. So it's implied it's her, whether or not we get confirmation. But I don't know what it is about this film, but it's not a bad entry. It's like Jeff Burr, the guy that directed it, and even the writer, for that matter. They understood what Tobe Hooper was trying to do, and they were trying to put their own stamp on it. I know that they were having some issues with the studio at the time. I don't remember all the details behind that. I know that they had to cut it down because there is an unrated version that featured some extra gore. And so this was another one trying to push that boundary, which I appreciated. The guy that played Leatherface, kind of made it his own. Again, kind of sympathetic also, but kind of not. So I don't know. It's a bizarre little film that works, but I can understand why it might not be someone else's cup of tea. It's a little bit more straightforward than some of the others, like compared to part 2.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really consider... I mean, this one seems like it's leaning straight on the horror aspect and trying to make everyone uncomfortable, trying to go back to the roots of the original, but sprinkling in little comedic elements. Like one scene I'm trying to remember was Leatherface still kind of working off of that idea that he's a little mentally incapacitated, and he has one of those, what the hell were they called? The Speak and Say? Is an old toy back in the 80s.
Yeah, like the Speak and Spell.
Yeah, Speak and Spell. So you'd sit there and you type stuff in, and it was like showing a picture of a clown, and they're like, "What is this?" And he's like, FOOD. And they're like, "Incorrect. What is this?" Showing the clown's face again. He goes, FOOD. Incorrect. And he's just getting so frustrated. He's like, "Ugh." So it's a simple little scene that's ridiculous but funny at the same time because it shows where he's at. He's like, well, that's clearly food. So I don't know. It's just little things like that in the film crack me up. There's a weird little guy, and I never could figure out, and I can't remember the guy's name. He's another one of those character actors you see in stuff. I'm going to have to do a little digging here. Hang on. Hang with us, people. I'm going to find his name eventually. Well, no, I'm not seeing his name. This is ridiculous. Where the hell? There was a guy in the film, and I'm not seeing him anywhere. What the fuck? This is weird.
I was going to start doing the Jeopardy music.
I feel like he was he at the gas station? Yeah, I think it was at the gas station at the very beginning of the film. He was just this weird little cretin of a man that Ken Foray's character comes across out in the middle of it looked like a swamp, and I don't know of any swampy areas in Texas. Of course, I don't live in Texas, so I don't know, but he's just a weird little dude, and he just has some of the weirdest lines in the movie. Like Kim Foray's got him at gunpoint, and he's sitting there, he's like, "How many of them are you?" And he's like, "How many what?" He's like, "How many of you sick, twisted freaks are there out here?" He's like, "Mister, I just want you to know one thing. I do not care for the tone of your voice." And it's just this odd little scene with this odd little cretin of a man. And it's little oddities like that in the movie that make it enjoyable for me.
I have to say something real quick. I was looking at the cast of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Couple things. One, I forgot that Viggo Mortensen was in it.
Yeah. Talk about a step forward, man. Go from this to Lord of the Rings.
And I didn't realize this either. So we do have our main Leatherface actor, but I did not know they have Kane Hodder on here with the credit as Leatherface as well.
That's right. He was the stunt Leatherface. So think about that. That man has played 3 out of the 4 big icons, technically, if you want to get specific. We know he did Jason. He's done Sons for Leatherface, so technically he's been Leatherface. And then he was technically Freddy at the end of Jason Goes to Hell.
And fun fact, they had... Before they did some rewrites of the Nightmare on Elm Street script, it's in his documentary, they actually reached out to him about playing Freddy. That was brought up.
Yeah.
But he said that...
I don't know if that would have worked.
I don't know if he would have fit the mold. I love him as Jason, but he's so damn big. But
yeah. Then
again, if he would have got it in the first place, who knows? We could have had reversed roles. Robert Englund as Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Another part of this film that I always found fascinating, and I've never been 100% sure about what they're implying here. So there was a little girl part of the family, right? So they did kind of reassemble like a different branch of the Sawyer family. So if we're to assume this is a direct sequel to the last film, we're under the impression, like we saw Chop Top die. We pretty sure that Drayton died because he had the grenade.
Yeah.
So if we were to assume Leatherface survived, that could explain, because he's wearing like a leg brace, and maybe he survived his wounds, because where Dennis Hopper kind of, how you survive that is beyond me, but we're not going to argue with it. We didn't see him die. So we can just kind of go from that and be like, okay, well, somehow he made it out. He found other family members, so you got a grandmother now, as kind of like your matriarch as opposed to Drayton's patriarchy. Then, as you said, Viggo Mortensen is kind of a brother character. And then who's the other guy? He was like I can't remember his name, but there was another brother, and they kind of seemed chummy. Like there was a good... This film just seems like it's littered with so many ridiculous little lines. But I remember there was an argument because Viggo Mortensen's character had this very Texan attitude about him, like that was his personality, and he wanted people to call him Tex. You know, I'm Tex, baby. And he was just real calm and cool or whatever. And his brother, who I'm going to assume is his brother, that's just where I'm going to lay it. He called him by his real name. And he just got, like they were sitting there cutting up some meat or something like that. And he called him by his real name. And he just, God damn it. I thought I told you to call me Tex. Just got so upset about it. And he's like, God damn it, boy, I'm sorry. And it's just, again, such an odd little conversation in this movie. But I love it so much because you see just this kind of camaraderie with these brothers. And then, like I said, there's a little girl. And I guess it's kind of implied that maybe this is Leatherface's kid. Maybe. I don't know. But she seems like she's kind of sweet on him. And then, of course, the grandmother or mama or whatever they call her talks about him loving his private parts. He knows what to do with them parts.
Oh, Lord.
And so are we trying to say that maybe possibly there was a girl that he, maybe... Because there was another, if I'm not mistaken in the story, there was another girl that he had captured and she got away. So I don't know if she was just going to be another. I don't know. I'm speculating here because I don't have any proof. Maybe I need to dig in a little bit deeper with this film. But I feel like it's a fun little entry, especially when you get the massive chainsaw at the very end. You remember their gift to him with this unusually large chainsaw that just should not even be a thing, but it's awesome nonetheless. And then you get the inscription "Saw his family."
I feel like I've seen that saw in like a lot of different homages to Leatherface and everything. Like that's the one everybody goes to because it was just so massive.
Yeah. And then, not to even mention, I know this is such a bizarre little tangent away from it, but do you remember the teaser trailer for this film?
Loosely, yes.
If you had no idea, and even at the time, I had no fucking idea what it was, but it's such an odd teaser trailer for this film that has fuck all to do with it, but it's just so amazing at the same time. You see Leatherface standing at a lake, but again, if you're unfamiliar with it, this is a different design, so you wouldn't immediately be like, oh yeah, this is Leatherface. So you just see this big hulking figure standing at a lake, and they just pan, and there's just this quiet music, and then suddenly they cut into the lake, and then the chainsaw comes up out of the lake, and a hand's holding it, throws it to him, it flips up in the air, he grabs it, lightning strikes it, and then it obviously kicks on, ignites, wha-bum, he turns around, and then it says the title of the... So it's like this Lady in the Lake legend with Leatherface. Ridiculous, but it's such a badass trailer, in my opinion.
When they still knew how to do trailers.
Right? So I would give this movie props on that alone, just doing something unique, because, I don't know, it was just, doesn't make any sense, has nothing to do with the plot, but it's just a fun little teaser, just to be like, yeah, he's coming back. Another quick shout out to the director of this film, Jeff Burr. He directed 2 of my favorite Puppet Master films as well. So
very nice.
I won't say that he's like this forgotten director that has done so many hidden gems, but I think he's a good director who has an idea, he has a plan, and he does what he sets out to do. So I'll give him a lot of credit for that. But no, part 3, it's probably a little harder to find sometimes, but if you can find it, definitely check it out. And if you can find the unrated version, I would recommend that as well. Get your gore on.
I actually just looked up part 3. $3 on Prime Video.
There you go. So. See? Cheap. Or just buy it outright.
Right.
I don't know how much it is, but I think I got it for a song on Vudu. So just keep your eyes open for these deals. They're out there. All right. So next.
Yeah.
I don't really have a lot to say. So Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, came out in 95, about 5 years after this one. And Jesus Christ. This was not a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie to me. I did at one time own a VHS copy of this. I'm not going to deny it because I was a completionist. And I have watched this movie more times than I care to admit, trying to understand it. And I don't. I do not understand this movie for the life of me. Even with the fact that it was written and directed by one of the original creators. Still blows my mind. So, I just... This is the movie that I think was filmed before Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger really hit big.
Yeah.
So they kind of held it back. Not for that reason, but I think it was just like they were trying to find people to kind of distribute it. And of course, they were moving on to bigger, better things like Jerry Maguire and Dazed and Confused and probably whatever else was going on at that time. And then suddenly their names were hot commodities. So you had interested distributors. And then, of course, they used their likenesses to be like, hey, look, we've got big stars in this. Let's make it happen. And I still, to this day, have no fucking clue what this movie was supposed to be. Because Leatherface is not Leatherface at all, to me.
Yeah.
Now, I can see where maybe they're trying to play with this idea that he's transgender, or maybe something in that realm. But the problem is that he does not look horribly disfigured anymore. So what are you trying to convey with the character here? Because he's not, even the skin he puts over his own face, just, it looks like just rubber. You know what I mean? It doesn't look like another face.
Yeah, it looks like he's just trying to wear a mask to make him look like a woman.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't want to tear this movie apart any more than the rest of the internet has, because I don't understand it. Like even the subplot where you had this, what was it, some dark cult or some underground mafia member come in, had those tattoos on his body, and just what was that? What was that? It didn't make any sense.
I feel like this movie was just a cash grab. Like they thought maybe we could make a little bit of money off of it.
But it's like they had no idea what the story was. They were just retread. At the beginning, they practically retread similar ground, and then they just veer off into left field with all these extra things that just don't make any sense. So who the fuck was Matthew McConaughey part of this tribe, and then they go out and kill people, and then they're... I don't know. I'm trying to connect dots that I don't even see, and I can't do it. So unless you've got something to say, I don't want to talk about this movie anymore because it's garbage.
It's honestly my least favorite. One of my, not just my least favorite film of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but one of my least favorite films of all time. The only thing I would add is I know that Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger wanted to have this movie erased.
Mm-hmm. And if it succeeded and I never saw it, I don't think I would be disappointed.
Yeah, I don't think I would
if it
be
just
either.
disappeared. No. So if somebody wants to argue in its favor and help me understand it, I'm all ears. But I honestly don't get it. So screw that movie. Anyway, the next actual Texas Chainsaw film we got was the reboot in 2003, which was, I believe, directed by Marcus Nispel. I think that's what it was. I feel like he had done another remake before this, and I'm trying to make sure, but I don't want to swear to that before I find all my details. I got Google up. Hang on, people. Yes, Marcus Nispel. I think he did a remake of Friday the 13th. He did that one. So maybe that was the other one I was thinking of. So I got that mistaken. Yeah, so this would have been the first one that he did. And this is, of course, made under Michael Bay's Platinum Dunes production company. So he had his, like it or love it. I don't know how people feel about Michael Bay. I'm kind of like,
It's about where I am.
I like some of his movies, but it always feels like it's the first of the movies of his that I like. I like the first Transformers. I like the first Bad Boys. But then when he goes into sequel territories where he just loses his mind, and I can do without it. But this film, it's not a bad Texas Chainsaw Massacre film by any means.
Yeah.
I mean, we get John Larroquette back, which is a nice touch. they put their own spin on the story, which I appreciated. So they weren't just rehashing what we already saw. So they kind of recreated the family. I know we've talked about him here before. For this very performance is Arlie Ermy as Sheriff Hoyt.
Fantastic.
I think this movie would falter if he wasn't in it. Like, with his screen presence and what he brings to the character, I think it would be less remembered if he was not in it.
I would agree with you completely on that one.
Because I think he saves it from just becoming a just run-of-the-mill remake that just like, yeah, kind of seen it. Okay, so now we've got a big Leatherface. Okay, yeah, he's doing his Leatherface stuff, but he adds character.
Well, and I know, not to bring this up, but I know that we have talked about the Netflix movie and how it suffers a lot because they don't have the family. Mm-hmm. And I think Arlie Ermy really added that crazed family function that we needed in this film, because Leatherface without someone pushing him just isn't as interesting.
And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of the other films that I don't care for, you're missing that. Like, I'll even go back to Next Generation. I don't remember there being someone treating Leatherface like he would, like he did, or even going back to Drayton, someone pushing him and just being like, boy, what's wrong with you? Hey, what's wrong with you? Like, that's where you kind of have that sympathy for the characters, because he's not right in the head. He's just doing what he's told. He doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
They say this is normal. He's like, okay. So he's in it. So you need a character like this to be worse than your actual monster. And that's where this dynamic works. When you put him in the forefront saying, well, he's your monster, then you have to ask, what's your driving force here for this character now?
Well, and maybe that's why, and I've had this conversation with you before, because I'm pretty sure Michael Bay's, I think he had his hand in all of these remakes that they tried to do. I think he had his hand in, obviously he had it in this Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think he had it in the Friday the 13th remake, if I remember correctly, and the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, if I remember correctly too. But
they were all under his banner.
The reason I think out of all of them, I enjoy the Texas Chainsaw Massacre one the most is I feel like to some degree they stayed with the source material in a more accurate way. And what I mean by that is, if you think about it, Arlie Ermy was basically the Drayton of this film.
Sure.
And he really pulled it off. It's like they had to find somebody to be the Drayton for a new generation of film viewers. And I feel like they pulled him in, and seeing him as a drill sergeant and everything, you kind of like, to me, that's what it was. It was like, shit, Leatherface lives with the drill sergeant. No wonder he does the shit that he does.
Right.
Like, to dumb it down there, I guess. But
But, I mean, no, you're absolutely right. He pushes everybody, and you still have those odd little characters. You have the wheelchair-bound family member. You have the elderly woman. Was it she wasn't older, or was she? Am I getting that? No, there was an older lady.
Yeah, there was
an older lady, and then there was a heavier set woman, and then a younger she kind of seemed like she was a person under the stairs. I hate to say it like that, but kind of a creepy little girl.
Yeah.
Wasn't super young, but kind of young, and I think she had a kid as well.
Yeah, because I think at the end of it, don't they take Jessica Biel's character takes a baby or something? That's right, because the girl they met at the beginning, it's implied that it was her kid. Yeah.
And they were trying to take her, and of course she was messed up. And that, you know what, I'll give that credit to that scene too, because that was a nice wrinkle. That was kind of redoing like the hitchhiker element, except instead of being a family member, this was someone who had just gotten away from them.
Yeah.
And she was so traumatized by it, she just couldn't bear to live with herself anymore.
Yeah.
And so the way all that went down, you're like, holy shit. So I felt that was kind of a nice way to play the same opening, but then put a twist on it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I really did kind of dig a lot of their choices here, because they, like you kind of mentioned, they didn't try to do everything scene for scene, but they were trying to remain true to certain elements in some ways while putting their own spin on it. And definitely with Arlie Ermy, they making him the sheriff as opposed to someone else. You had someone that you're meant to trust because he's supposed to be a cop. So immediately like, okay, so he's the good guy.
Yeah.
And then they find a way to twist that back around. So this is a great way to do a remake. Whether or not I would say, like, I wouldn't say in any way is this superior to the original. Far from it. But it's still good because they find a way to tell the same story but make the necessary changes so you don't see it beat for beat.
Yeah, and I think, too, it's one of those films where I'm not going to go out of my way to seek it out. Like, if I have to go somewhere and, like, purchase it just to watch it. But if I have it on a streaming service and I'm scrolling through, I might come back and watch it. If it's on sale, maybe. It's not something where if I see that it's on, I'm going to completely avoid it.
Right.
And I also want I want to give, just real quick, sorry, I want to give a shout out to the guy that played Leatherface, because I think he did phenomenal. I think he showed how quickly Leatherface can become unhinged. But another thing that they sort of showed in this film that I don't think they touched on too much in the other films, Leatherface is a butcher. He butchers humans. They actually show him doing his craft, and they show how good he is at it. I know that sounds kind of morbid, but in a way, it kind of adds to the creepiness of the character. Like, you see how good he is at what he does. You know, he's rubbing the bodies. He knows where the meat is that he wants. He's cutting where he needs to, almost like with surgical precision. And it's just, to me, that really added to it, because I'm like, he's not just some big aggressive maniac who's just hacking and slashing people. He has skill in what he does because he's been doing it for so long. And I think that's what makes it creepy, is you realize that he's been doing it for so long.
Yeah. And I don't know, I would definitely recommend people check it out. If I wouldn't go out of, I'm kind of like you, I wouldn't go out of my way for it, but it's always kind of fun to come back around to it and kind of re-experience, because like, yeah, this wasn't all that bad. Like you kind of forget it's not as bad as you might think.
Yeah.
Because, as I've argued so many times, I don't feel like a lot of these really live up to what the original is, and that's a high bar. But it's not a bad take, and I'll go ahead and throw in its prequel, because they didn't do a sequel, they did a prequel to this film, which was Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, that came out 3 years later, I think in 2006.
If I remember right.
And I felt it was not a bad take on it either. It had very similar elements to it. The feel of the movie still felt that kind of grimy, gritty 2000s angle where everything was just... I don't know if you kind of feel this or not, but if you take a look at a lot of movies within that time period, understandably, it's probably a sign of the times. And I think a lot of people were very apathetic about the world because this is like post 9/11, so everybody just had this anger about them, and everything just kind of seems bleak.
Yeah.
And these films had that bleakness to them, so this might be one of the things that could be a turnoff for some people because it has that feel to it. And again, I still felt like this was for being a prequel, it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Well, and
it's not bad.
And honestly, something that this prequel did really well, it's the biggest thing that pisses me off about it, but it's also the biggest thing that made this film enjoyable. You know the characters aren't going to make it out, or if they do make it out, it makes you question why they didn't go report these things.
Yeah.
At the end of this film, spoiler alert, at the end of this film, you know, she's driving, thinking she's going to get away, and there's police nearby, and next thing you know, she gets a chainsaw through the back. He comes through the back of the car, through the seat, because he's in the back seat, and kills her, and she ends up crashing into the cops, and that kills me, because I actually really started to like her character, you know, and like that just, I don't know, that to this day it still like irritates me, but I understand it, so it's not as irritating. It's just like I've talked to you about with the Friday the 13th remake, when they're in the tunnels and they're escaping Jason, and the one girl who I really hoped would have lived gets killed.
Yeah.
But her death wasn't... She didn't die in the right way. Let me put it that way. Her death should have been a little more meaningful than what it was, because it was literally, she was getting ready to come out, machete through the chest, gets pulled back in, and then it's done. A character that a lot of people liked, a lot of people were hoping would live. This girl's death in the prequel to Texas, I think it was called The Beginning, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Her death was more impactful because you really had hope that she was going to get free, and you watched her go through all this, and her death created a chain reaction. You know, she gets killed, the car crashes, the police die. there was just more to it. It was more meaningful. And I think that's why it doesn't piss me off as much. I wanted to go back just real quick to the 2003 film and just say, part of me wishes they would have done a sequel, because at the end, Leatherface gets his arm hacked off.
Yeah.
And something about seeing how a one-armed Leatherface would be able to do things, I don't know why, but something about that just sounds kind of interesting.
I honestly feel like probably the reason they did the prequel is they felt like they had cornered themselves, but I'm like you. I think that would have been an interesting way to approach it. Like, maybe he comes up with some device to help him have his... I mean, why not? Some archaic little thing where he could just hook his chainsaw up to, and now he's got a chainsaw arm. I mean, come on, that would have been badass.
That, or even it's a family of rednecks. Who's to say that they wouldn't kidnap children, and you think you've got a bunch of children that you can trust, but they're actually Leatherface's little minions.
Yeah.
I mean,
why not? No, I'm definitely with you there. Seeing how the sheriff kind of became the sheriff, if you will, because we find out in this prequel he was not the sheriff.
Yeah.
He just took on the persona. I thought that was kind of a nice little twist to it, because they never did explain. You just kind of figured, okay, well, he got voted in and he just happened to be part of this crazy family. No. He found his way into that role and just kind of took it over. And another thing I want to touch on is, this is another one of those films, kind of like Part 2, as I said, had a stellar cast. I feel like this one definitely has a stellar cast. No offense to Jessica Biel and her crew of misfits, but for me, I don't know if anybody knows some of these names, but they're known to me, and I think they are solid actors. Jordana Brewster, who played the main girl, Chrissy, in this film, she probably best known to a lot of people in the Fast and the Furious franchise. I think she was... I've personally never watched a whole lot of those films, so I couldn't tell you. I think she was Paul Walker's girlfriend in that film.
I think so.
Was that Vin Diesel's sister? Is that right? I don't remember. I feel like there was a connection between them.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Anyway,
it doesn't matter.
I'm not big on those films, so...
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't care for them either. I've probably watched 2, and that's about it. But she's in it. I think she's a great actress. But Matt Bomer, who plays Eric, who's essentially one of the main 2 guys in this, he is a fucking delight. Not in just this film, but in general. Like, anything I ever see him in, he's just a great actor. Honestly felt like he would have been a great Superman at one point, because he's just got a look about him that would have just been like on point, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. But no, he's a solid actor, and I wanted to give him props, shout out, and all that. What's next on the list here? Oh, okay. So now we're down. I guess because I really don't have much to say about a lot of these. We're not going to talk about the last one, because we've talked about it enough here. Texas Chainsaw 2022 can kiss my ass on Netflix. It is a shit movie. It does absolutely everything wrong. We've said it before. That's where I'm leaving it. I've never seen Leatherface, which is the 2017 prequel where it was supposed to be Leatherface as a kid. One of the main reasons I've never watched it is because I don't need that. I don't need some mystery movie. From what I've heard, that's what it is. You have this group of kids, and they are positioned in a way where you have to try and figure out which one of these kids is Leatherface. Who cares? You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, the whole Leatherface plot is supposed to be kids in a group, and you're trying to try to figure out who Leatherface is, and really don't want to see that. I don't care to see that. I don't need to know who he is as a kid, you know? I mean, or at least as a mystery, you know? It just, who cares?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It's... Wes Craven used to say that with horror films, you need to keep some mystery. You need to keep it simple. Maybe have the basic ideas of why the character is the way they are, but don't go too much into it. That when you take the mystery out, it's not scary anymore.
Right. That's one of the reasons I've kind of avoided that one, because I never heard anything great about it. It was never some high class. It was just like, oh my God, this is the greatest movie about Leatherface you'll ever see. So I never felt the need to do that, because I don't need that.
Yeah.
And so outside of the god-awful Netflix requel, whatever the fuck they were trying to do with that, would be Texas Chainsaw 3D, which came out in 2013. I didn't hate it. necessarily, but I also feel like there are issues with it, especially the time span in which it's supposed to take place. Something doesn't add up, because if you say that, say, Leatherface was 20 or in his 20s in 1973, let's even go so far as to say he was 23. So now we've got an equal footing there. So he's 23 in 1973. Fast forward to 2013, he would be what, 73 at that point, or 70?
Something in that direction.
Yeah. So, and he doesn't seem like a 70-year-old Leatherface, so something doesn't add up, because they never specified that it was supposed to be 20, 30 some odd years, yet everything seems pretty modern day for 2013 standards.
Right.
So story-wise, there's just too many plot holes, but at the same time, there's just some interesting things in the film that are fun, like the main girl, who is it, Alexandria Daddario? I think who was...
I think so, yeah.
Big blue eyes, that's what I call her. She's got some gorgeous blue eyes, let me tell you.
I had
hypnotic.
I had a thing for her.
But we find out within the story she was like a niece to Leatherface or something like that. She's related to him in some way.
Yeah.
And they kind of do a twist at the end where she pretty much sicks Leatherface on some of the bad guys or the other bad people. So he kind of becomes the hero in some aspect in the film.
Yeah.
Which was kind of a neat little idea. So, like I said, there's a love-hate I have with it, because I feel like there's some good ideas there. It's just the overall execution falls flat, because when you really start to really think on it, something's just not adding up, and some things just, I don't know, it falls kind of flat. So I don't hate it necessarily, but I don't really consider it one of the better Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies either.
Yeah, I kind of consider it like almost like a guilty pleasure of mine. Like, I enjoy it for what it is, but I'm kind of with you there. Like, there's a lot of stuff I don't like about it, but overall, I mean, it's not something that I would go out of my way to avoid, I guess. If it's on,
right.
If it's on, I'll watch it. I just won't pay that much attention to it, maybe. So.
Yeah, I think I've watched it. I probably haven't watched it all that much, twice at the most, but even that I feel like is incorrect.
Yeah.
But I don't remember walking away from it hating it, because I do remember hearing a lot of hate for it. And this is at a time where I was willing to give some of these movies extra shots no matter what. But, when it came down to, like I said, the last two, I'm still a fan of the franchise, and I want to see a good one, and I was hoping for that. Leatherface just kind of worried me, and then Texas Chainsaw Massacre for Netflix just confirmed that no one understands this franchise.
Yeah.
Like Tobe Hooper. You have people who somewhat understand it. I'm not saying that I could direct a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie and make it one of the best ones that's ever been made. Not going to say that at all. But I feel like I understand what needs to work, and we've talked about it as we're sitting here. You need the family. You need understanding for the character. You don't need necessarily to make him super sympathetic, but I think a little wrinkle of that doesn't hurt.
A smidge, yeah.
So I guess I really don't have much to say more about that one. It was an oddity, to say the least, especially during the height of 3D. And I don't know, I want to hold out hope that one day we will get someone to do a proper sequel, reboot, reimagining, whatever it may be, to get this franchise back off the ground onto the right footing, because this is the most inconsistent franchise of any of them, at least with Freddy, Jason, Chucky, Michael. I know Michael has like 3 different timelines now, but at least there was a stretch of movies that work.
Right.
And same with the rest of them. They might not all be great, but they're consistent from beginning to end.
Like I've told you, we've had a episode where we've brought it up. Like I've told you before, I think a change of location would be cool. I would love to see the same family, but in like swamplands. That way you don't have just the family to worry about. You have gators and everything else to worry about too. I think that would be cool. And I'm trying to think here. Other than the 2022 one, there was the 2017 Leatherface.
Yeah, that was the one with the kids and the mystery and shit that I never saw, because I don't need to see that.
And I'll be honest, I've never seen it either, so.
Yeah. And they made it so hard to watch at first, because I think when it first came out, it was like a direct TV movie or something like that. So you had to have their service, you had to do all that. And I was just like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going through this. And then eventually, I think you can find it on Peacock or something now.
You might be able to.
And I've been tempted to check it out, but at the same time, I'm just not eager to check it out. So maybe one day I'll give it a watch just for shits and giggles, but I'm not going out of I'm not going to do it I'm not doing it out of passion.
I
just put it that way. It'd just be like, I'll get around to it maybe one day. Maybe not. Who cares? My life is not going to be emptier for not having watched that film.
Right. I get that.
So, but again, one day, maybe, hopefully somebody will get it right and we can finally get something more consistent. And I think that's why I love it so much, because, for example, here's another great thing, something I'm looking forward to. And this I actually have good hopes for, because there's a game company, I think it's Gun Media, are doing a Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game, and they were actually part of the team responsible for Friday the 13th, the game, where you had 8 people doing Jason or as counselors, and then one person going around trying to kill him as Jason. It was a great, fun game. It's like they captured all the essence of being in one of those movies, which was fantastic. You had every incarnation of Jason you could play, and that's what I'm hoping for with this, because all the little details that they put into it, these are people passionate about the franchise, and even the way you get to play is different, because in most games nowadays where you have these killer ideas, it's like a 4-on-1. So you have 4 people who are the survivors and one person's the killer. Well, with this game, they're changing it up. So now you can have 4 people trying to escape, but now 3 people get to play as the family. So someone gets to be the cook, someone gets to be the Leatherface, someone gets to be the hitchhiker. That's fantastic. So you don't have to be one of, everyone can be someone and try to kill the survivors.
Yeah.
And how you get through the house, and every little detail, like the house, recreated down to the minuscule little detail. I love that so much. That's the kind of passion that needs to go into one of these movies.
Yeah.
You don't have to remake it shot for shot. Do not be like Gus Van Sant and recreate the entire movie of Psycho, word for word, frame by frame. Just understand the material and then represent it to the world, because it can be done. It's just got to have the right people behind it with the right passion. And I don't feel like they've found the right person yet. Some have come close, but they're not there yet.
I agree with you there.
So,
well,
that's all I got on this franchise.
Well, that's all I can think of. I think we've done a pretty good job at squaring it all away today. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. So if you want to tell the people where to find us, by all means.
Well, Ramblers, let us know which Texas Chainsaw Massacre film is your favorite. Do you have one that maybe might surprise us? Are you a fan of Leatherface? Are you a fan of the Netflix version? If you are, what is wrong with you? But hey, you can let us know on Twitter, and we'll have a discussion about it. I'd love to hear somebody out there tell me why. If you want to really go into great detail, send us an email instead at horrorramblings@gmail.com, because you're going to have to write an essay to really get me to understand why you like the Netflix version. Maybe, you know what? I would actually love someone to convince me to watch Leatherface and give me some good reasons as to why. That would be a solid argument that I would love to hear. Because, again, I have nothing to base it on other than reviews. And we all know that most of these horror films that we all know and love are shit on by critics. So maybe I'm missing something and I just don't realize it. If you want to discuss horror with like-minded individuals, join our Facebook group or join us in our Ramblers room on Discord. You can do both if you want. You don't have to do one or the other. Do both. You can even find us on Instagram to see an assortment of horror images. And if you're feeling generous and want to support the show financially, head on over to patreon.com/pencilandpaperproductions. And if you want to help the show grow, leave a review on your favorite podcasting app. All it takes is 5 little stars. And you can tell your friends to find us on their favorite platform as well, and they can give us 5 stars on that one. And if you happen to be using Spotify, take a look at our weekly questions and polls and let us know what you think. Finally, if you want a central hub, keep up with any and all things at pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience.
And remember, guys, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings Podcast.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.